capacity buys wheat at the cash sale day. That means now not only are they going to be hedging with multiple contract expirations, they're going to need to lift their hedge on the date of those purchases. So for example, they're planning all their purchases on December 1st. That's when they're going to buy all these different futures contracts. And then when they make their first purchase on January 1st, they're going to remove 10 of those March futures contracts because they will be executing their cash activity of 50,000 bushels worth, which is 10 contracts worth in the futures market. So they'll lift their hedge on 10 of the March contracts. And that will be the case each month when they make their actual purchase in the cash market. So let's take a look at what their activity in the cash market and their buys in the futures markets and their sells in the futures markets look like if they want to execute this strategy where they're hedging six months of wheat purchases, where they're purchasing 50,000 bushels per month. So to conduct this example, I took real data from 2016 for these specific futures expirations, the March, May, and July futures. And just to make the example easy, I assumed a constant basis of 0.25 under the nearby futures contract. And note, I do have a typo here as well. So I've listed all of the spot prices 0.25 cents under the nearby futures contract. And here I say that it's 25 cents. So this should read 0.0025 if I put it with a dollar sign. And it should be a quarter of a cent, not 25 cents. But I'm going to continue this example with the way the numbers are in the table. Okay, so let's take a look at what's going on December 1st. On December 1st, the mill says, boy, those prices look pretty good. Let's lock in our 6 months worth of our purchases today. So I'm going to buy 30 March futures contracts, and that will hedge January, February, and March purchases. I'm going to buy 20 May, that will hedge April and May's purchases, and 10 July contracts, that will hedge June's purchase. So we do that on December 1st. On January 1st, we're going to go and buy our month's worth of wheat, so 50,000 bushels of spot. And then I'm going to lift my hedge of 10 contracts in the March futures contract. And I remain 20 contracts long in the March futures, 20 long in May, and 10 long in July. So in this column, I'm going to calculate my net price paid for wheat. And this is going to be arithmetically exactly the same the way we did for the farmer example, because it's going to be the price that they get in the spot market, except it is a little bit weird that we're putting a minus 479. That's going to help us remember that the mill is buying wheat in the spot market, and if he's buying, we need to put a minus sign on it. So he's paying 479 in the spot market. He bought at 470, so we've got a minus 470 here, and he lifted the hedge or sold at 479.25, so that's why we've got 479.25 there. And as was the case with our farmer examples, we are assuming that the basis is not changing here, so we see that the farmer is paying 469.75. That's exactly equal to what he saw in the spot market on the date he placed his hedge, which is exactly what we should get. Similarly, on February 1st, they hedge 50,000 bushels of purchase of wheat in the spot market. They lift another 10 contracts of March to lift that hedge, and that means they remain 10 contracts long in March, 20 long in May, 10 in July. Similarly, here for the net price paid calculation, they pay the price they're seeing in the spot market on the date that they go and buy. They bought March futures for 470, so we get a minus 470 here, and they close that position at 445, so they sell 445, we do that arithmetic calculation, we get minus 469.75, just like we saw on the spot market on December 1st. Okay, so you can follow along this logic for the March row. I'm going to skip down here to the April row so that we can talk about what happens after that March contract has gone off the board. So notice on April 1st, we've already closed all of our March positions, and now we're buying. They're going to buy 50,000 bushels in the spot market and lift 10 of their hedged futures contracts, and that's going to be in the May contract because the March contracts were already gone as of that March purchase a month ago. So that means 10 of the contracts have come off of the May hedge, and we're left with 10 contracts left and 10 July contracts. And he has to pay $477.75 in the spot market for those 50,000 bushels. He bought the May contract for $476.50. We see that here. And he sold the May futures for $478. We see that here. And so he gets minus $476.25 is what he had to pay as a net price. Now notice that's not $469.75 anymore. That's $476.50. And at first you may think, oh, maybe we made a mistake. But we did not make a mistake, actually. We've talked briefly before about how this forward curve provides incentive to store and kind of looking at that price increasing through the marketing year. And so the mill should be expected to pay a little higher price to compensate whoever was undergoing the storage costs from December to May. And so by the time he gets around to making purchases a few months later, and against the May contract, he's going to be looking at having to pay the price he saw in December that corresponds to the May point in time, this later sale. And if I scroll down here, you'll see that happens through the next couple of months, and then when May goes off the board, we see that jump to $483, which was this price. Okay. So take a look at those rows carefully. Make sure you understand each of these calculations. As I'm thinking ahead to how I might write the exam, asking you to fill in these kind of columns on a table would be kind of a perfect exam question because it's something I can ask you to calculate in the room with a pencil and paper and a simple calculator, and doesn't require you to have Excel in front of you. So be aware, it's a good exam question. All right, so the only thing we have left to talk about is the importance of having a line of credit in futures hedging. So we've talked about how if you're going to take some action in the spot market, you can take the same action in the futures market. And we mentioned that in order to do that, you're going to have to post some margin, which is money in the brokerage account. And if that position is losing money, that you'll have to put in some more money to meet the margin requirement. Well, if you're a large farmer or a large flour mill, the money that is required to add to your brokerage account as the prices are moving against your hedged position can be quite a lot. And if you don't have the money to just put in on your own, it's very important that you have access to a line of credit from a lender who understands that yes, you have the grain in the bin and you're going to sell it at a later date and the price is hedged, so it's a very low risk loan, but they'll give you the money to put in your brokerage account to meet the margin requirement so that you don't have to close your position. Because if margin goes below the required level and you don't put the money in within like a day maximum, then your brokerage is going to close that position for you. You're not allowed to maintain a position when your margin goes below a certain threshold. So if you're going to be doing this, it's very important to have a relationship with a banker who understands how hedging works and is willing to give you a loan and let you wire money to your brokerage account.